I want to give a shout out to my good friend, David Estrada, who is always representing NAMI at Tri-City Mental Health, always representing the labor movement whenever I see him. So brother, it's always great to see you. And all of our good friend, Matthew Lyons, who does such a wonderful job representing Mr. Holden here in the district. And so Brittany, thank you for the introduction. I won't take too long, but to introduce myself to the rest of you whom I've never met before. My name is Jed Leano. I'm on the Claremont City Council. I was appointed mayor in December of 2021. It's a one-year rotating mayor. And last year, Councilmember Stark was the mayor of Claremont. And I got into local politics because of this issue. I really wanted to do local work on affordable housing, on homelessness. It's the thing that I was passionate about the most as a commissioner in the city. It's the thing that I thought that didn't get enough attention at a local level, and I didn't think there were enough progressive voices championing the cause. Since I got elected, I've become chair of the San Gabriel Valley Regional Housing Trust. We funded over 500 units of permanent supportive housing, 3 interim housing units, 3 interim housing projects, and we've also developed an entire system of development to help create ideas, fund ideas, and then close and finish them into affordable housing. I'm also the chair of Tri-City Mental Health, which is the public mental health agency for Pomona, Laverne, and Claremont. That's also the local service provider for a lot of the unsheltered population's needs. Through our Measure H money, a lot of the cities that are in the Tri-City group, we contract with Tri-City Mental Health for a lot of our unsheltered needs. And so it's great to be here with all of you, and I'm happy to talk about this very complicated and difficult topic. And I'll throw it to my colleague, Councilmember Stark.
Thank you, Jed. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone tonight. I did not enter into politics for one issue. I grew up in Claremont. I raised my 3 children in Claremont. Mostly everything that has happened to me in my life has happened in this region. And the sense of obligation that I feel into service is really what motivated me. Also, additionally, Claremont has had a reputation of being a city with women leadership, with females at the helm. And while that is true in our largest industry, the colleges, and it's true in the nonprofit sector for sure, City Council didn't have equal representation for over a decade. And so that also felt really like, like in my brain, I was like, oh yeah, there's women are in charge in Claremont. And then all of a sudden I was like, what's up with all these guys? Like, where are the women? So that was also a major motivating factor to me. The issues around ensuring that Claremont and our region is a place where opportunity grows and where life thrives is not only essential to my values, but also to the sustainability of a city. If people can't have opportunity to start out, then our public systems will not be able to flourish, and actually they'll erode. So we need to continue to make room. Well, I shouldn't even say continue, but cities can't be built with the notion that, oh, we figured it out in the 50s, because it turns out that vision isn't sustainable for our grandchildren, or like my grandchildren, I should say, maybe some of your children, this and maybe some of us now. The way that we envisioned small towns in Los Angeles County, and the way that they were set up in the 50s and 60s, where you could buy a home for $10,000 and you could qualify for those loans, that is now over. And so at this point, for a young family to qualify for $1 million loan, it's untenable. and then you add on having like school debt and what have you. So the practicality of addressing affordability is at the very heart of cities to be able to survive in the future, cities like Claremont. So that's sort of my take. Thank you so much. I look forward to this conversation. For those of you who I don't know yet, I really look forward to meeting you, because one thing is for sure, this is work we need to do together.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that made it especially important to me to be willing to reach out of city lines, because like, as if the housing solutions in Claremont don't impact Laverne, or housing issues in Laverne don't impact San Dimas, and so on and so forth. And that's what I love, Jed is experience and expertise in taking a regional look at all of this. And then Jen, something that I love you touching on is kind of like bringing this down to it being literally just a human issue. And that's one of the things that I hope we can pull out is too often when we're talking about something that's political, whatever that means, we run to a specific corner and the assigned talking points of those corners, rather than recognizing that we're talking about people. And so if we're talking about the housing crisis, right, you brought up the point of young families, of starter homes, of home inflation. We also have the issue of people who are housing vulnerable, right? Who are literally a hospital bill away from being homeless at any given issue. So we have the issue of affordability for your young family, and then also the safety net issue. And so I'm wondering if you can, are those two things interrelated, or do they get dealt with differently? And how do we navigate discussing that there are these two different issues and we got to talk about them both?
Brittany, I think that you are 100% right, that these are, that rhetoric is intended to inflame people, to get you to take a side, and then to open up your pocketbook and give money to something. Rhetoric is not the way in which we are going to address these issues. These are human issues about, and also, part of what I really learned from with Larkin Place and our failure to approve the easement that project required, is that the words that we use are inadequate to describe the situation. So people who were greatly opposed to this project use this term chronically homeless. Chronic homelessness is being without stable housing for 1 year. And I want anyone to think of, if you have gotten to that point where you have been living paycheck to paycheck and not being able to make ends meet, if you then fall into a place of not secure housing, how are you going to have enough money to make first and last rent within a year? So essentially, anyone who falls into this situation, who doesn't have family wealth and doesn't have a safety net there, is going to be chronically homeless. People use the term chronically homeless as if they were describing someone feral. And these words that you can see, I'm starting to get all mad, which is not helpful, but this is not helping us get to where we need to go, because it helps people who are sheltered and who are not living so close to the edge of poverty. It gives that conversation the ability to create fear in people who are not them. So I think that's sort of the psychology around the way we talk, the words that we choose, and the manner in which we have discussion that can somehow pull away from rhetoric, I think is extremely important.
Agreed. Anything
Brittany,
to add to that, Jed, either?
Yeah, I want to piggyback on what Jennifer was talking about. I think that Jennifer's right on the money talking about the rhetoric that is used, but I want to just start us off with some baseline facts and understanding about what it is that we're fighting about here. because when we talk about the need for housing and the housing crisis, I'm sorry, I need to stop. I need to take a step back. Before I go any further, I need to just give a shout out to former Claremont Mayor Karen Rosenthal. There's a former mayor here. I need to give a shout out. Hello, former Mayor Rosenthal. Served Claremont honorably as a former council member and mayor, and thank you for being with us. Also a champion for housing. I want to just get right to the difficulty of fighting about housing at a local level. Fighting about housing, it doesn't matter what level or what type of housing that we're fighting about. The whole reason why we need to subsidize housing at income levels and price levels is because the market is inadequate to cover the economic needs of the people who live here. So and these numbers are not disputed. These are the facts and numbers from HCD. They're verified by consultants. They're verified by academic research. Just to keep up with basic population, every year, the state of California needs to produce 180,000 housing units per year. And every year for the last 35 years or more, we have produced less than 60% of that need. Right now, we're just likely going to produce about 100,000 housing units from the last from the last year. We need 180 just to keep pace. And so we're not keeping pace, and we haven't been keeping pace for about 35 years. So what does that happen? What does that mean? Every year when you have a population that's growing and you need housing to house the people who live and work in your state, when you don't have enough housing units and you create a deficit, this is basic economics 101. When you don't produce enough supply of something, the cost of it is absolutely astronomical. Just close your eyes for 1 second and imagine that we didn't make enough food for all the people who live in the state of California. So what little food you make, it now becomes luxury food, okay? And that's kind of what's dominating the housing conversation. People oppose housing when it's like condos or apartments, and they say, well, that's, what is luxury condos or luxury apartments going to do? The reason it's luxury is because we don't have enough of it. If we had enough of it, the prices would normalize and it wouldn't be luxury. And we wouldn't need to provide, housing units that were subsidized and controlled at what you can rent and who can live there at what income, because the market would just provide for it. And so when we talk about the failure of our policymaking on Larkin in Claremont, but when we also talk about just the difficulty of talking about housing altogether, I don't care whether you're talking about condominiums or single family homes or apartments or permanent supportive housing for extremely low income people. We are in this crisis because all of it is not being built enough at the scale that's necessary, at the volume that's necessary. And it doesn't matter what kind of project that is in front of you or being considered, or whatever reason someone comes up with for opposing. The opposition to all of it is the cause and the giving rise to the necessity of all of these extreme measures, like extremely low income permanent supportive housing.
Good. So it's dire, right? Because those numbers are stark and stark, but in much. But so every city needs to do something, right? And can each city doing their little something make a dent, or is it going to take something regional and more collaborative in order to have a regional impact? Or is it just like, we just got to take what we can get because we're losing in the crisis? You know what I mean?
I think that Jed and I have a slightly different take on land use. And that's a little bit more like in the weeds that I don't think serve this discussion very much. But I think that one of the things that really, I think that what Larkin Place is a good example of, because the only good thing of a failure is that you can learn and not make that same mistake moving forward. So I think that for that specific development, that was a subsidized development for adults with special needs and who have experienced a lack of stable housing for a year. They were the population is being able, for the funding of the project, the term is chronically unhoused. That's the term that helps get the funding from the different funding sources. That term describes someone who has been without stable housing for 1 year. Just circling back to my example of, if you have been living month to month, fall out of housing, to get back within a year implies you have a safety net.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, anyone who experiences losing housing because of expenses, to make that up, to get first and last again within a year, it's literally impossible. So anyways, I think that one of the things that is really important is to involve the community ahead of time in public engagement campaigns to start addressing the needs of housing and getting people to understand that this is not a political statement. This is about, you know, to use Jed's, the economics of housing is real. And so it's like this sort of idea, like a lot of people will sort of say like, oh, are you going to build on every vacant lot? Or are you going to put housing everywhere? Well, according to me, no, I don't think that. I think that there's places that are really inappropriate for housing, but in a vacant lot infill in a neighborhood, yeah, we're gonna put housing there. It's a neighborhood. That's where people go. That's where we want neighbors. So I think that these discussions need to be had. And I think one thing that cities aren't particularly great at is having difficult community engagement, community discussions about these issues ahead of time. And that's why it's so important, and why we have to lean on the nonprofits and the community groups to help have these conversations about, okay, so you're fighting because you don't want people to live in this vacant lot by your house. That's when this discussion needs to start happening, before it's actually happening, because then it gets
before it's a plan that's gonna happen and feels kind of out of control, like it's out of people's control.
Just to sort of talk about, just to frame Larkin Place, that the zoning for that project in Claremont is indeed in institutional residential, meaning that land has the zoning to have no height limits and to have 30 units per acre. It is zoned that way. It is in, that is the appropriate place, and in our housing element, and has been since our 4th housing element, that is going to be a place for dense housing. However, because the project had this discretionary easement, the project is denied. So we can go back to get funding, but they have to wait a whole year to go through the funding process again, because projects are funded as designed, not in idea form. So that essentially that easement, for intensive purposes now, the project is indeed in jeopardy. The zoning is not, and another project will come forward, but it might not be the project with Jamboree, because Jamboree might not want to still continue working in this environment.
Brittany, did we lose you? I think maybe Brittany's frozen.
I think so too.
If Brittany's frozen, Matt, do you want me to just continue on with that question? And then, Brittany's back. Okay. Brittany, I want to take you back to the question that you asked about regional approaches to addressing the issue. So there are a number of different regional initiatives right now that are trying to help bring about affordable housing. One of them, the San Gabriel Valley Regional Housing Trust. There are 33 cities in the San Gabriel Valley, and 22 of the cities in the region are members. So that means that 2/3 of the cities have joined. Okay, but and I don't say this to be disparaging or to call out any sort of gripe. I'm really proud of the work that we do, and I think we're going to continue to doing some really great and outstanding work. Within the Regional Housing Trust, we funded 9 projects. Excuse me, we funded 11 projects, and those 11 projects have been built by 4 cities. And so, I mean, let's just do the math. Let's just do the numbers again, okay? There's 33 cities in the San Gabriel Valley. 22 of them joined the Regional Housing Trust. And of the 22 that joined the trust, like 5 of them built the 11 projects. 2 of them are in Claremont, okay? 3 of them are in Pomona. And so, you know, right now, there are calls for regional collaboration and partnership. That's absolutely necessary. There are a number of bills that are in the legislature that hopefully get out of suspense this week. One of them is SB 679 that would create a regional permanent source of funding for affordable housing. It's being sponsored by Senator Kamlager, and is written. It was co-authored by the United Way, and they're doing a great job lobbying for it. And regional solutions are obviously at scale more feasible. But right now, the politics of housing is that not everybody's at the table. You know, we have 33 players at the table and only 22 are paying into the fund. And in the fund, only 6 or 5 players are withdrawing the money. And we got to get those numbers up. And so that's just the reality of the situation right now.
Hey, Mayor Jed, this is Ed Hume. How are you?
Good to see you.
Hey, can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Great. I had a question about barriers to entry.
Out like that.
Could you talk a little bit about just specifically about the barriers to entry, for potential barriers to entry from your perspective, that's keeping other projects from happening in other places besides Claremont and Pomona and wherever?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I'll give you a perfect example. This year coming up, if not already finished, most cities are voting to adopt updates to their housing elements. For those of you that are following this process, every 8 years, a city has to update their general plan to say where they're going to put a certain number of housing units. When the last time we did a housing element, it was right after a recession. So the state of California assigned a certain number of housing units. And because of the recession, because of economic factors that arose out of the lack of capital, the number of housing units that were demanded of cities were extremely low, like extraordinarily low. Claremont's last housing element number requirement was like 373. And people freaked out about it. Like, oh my God, 373 units, right? And now, because, you know, we did the census, and because there is a housing element update that is not in the aftermath of like a once in a generation recession, and because we have not been building enough housing, the number for all cities, Laverne, Claremont, San Dimas, the number is extraordinarily high. And it didn't matter like what methodology we chose to arrive at the number per city, the number was going to be high no matter what, because the total volume of numbers is very high. The difficulty for every city to update its housing element process is perfectly emblematic of the difficulty in getting more players to the table. And that is, there's a very simple connection to this. I hate to say things in politics are simple, but this is a very direct and streamlined fact. And the fact is that local elected officials have the ability to promote, stay neutral on, or prohibit and deny the building of housing in their town, and even within their town, within their district. And when people feel like there is a political pushback for that, people won't touch it. It's a hot potato that nobody wants to go near. And it's an ongoing, regularly occurring, annual, biannual, every 4-year election cycle occurrence. And it is the root cause, frankly, of our housing crisis. And so I think that the requirement that every city genuinely and sincerely adopt a housing element that is able to really create housing, you can't put fake sites anymore. You can't put them in a map and say, hey, 500 housing units are going to go over here. There are new laws and new requirements that say that you're not allowed to do that anymore. A lot of cities are turning in housing element updates where, some brand new restaurant just got built on that. Like, there's not going to be housing there in the next 8 years. They just built a brand new shopping center, brand new restaurant. Like, that's not going to happen. And we're going to be stuck at this same place of either being compelled to do it or finding the political wherewithal and courage to do it ourselves.
So I did want to ask about the whole being compelled to do it, because
Could I add to that? I think that beyond that I truly hate the idea of centralized control. I do. I want local control. I want cities to be able to say what's best for cities. However, because electeds are not willing to make their constituents not vote for them again, it's not happening. And so it makes perfect sense why the state is centralizing control, because at the local level, it's not happening. And I hate that fact. I think that to just add to what Jed was saying in a little bit meaner way is that it's the community process is the biggest obstacle, because every meeting that gets thrown in front of any project costs thousands of more dollars and months more time. And that's terrible. That's terrible that our own democracy is making it so that we can't get hard things done. And so that, yay, we got a lot of work to do.
Well, and that's what my question was going to be. At what point is it simply going to be out of our control? And like you said, Jennifer, that's the last thing community members want to hear is, look, this area is zoned for this. We can't say no, right?
But that's an example of local control. You zone an area for something, and then people need to hold their elected officials accountable to then doing that. It's zoned and it needs to get done, and there just needs to be enough people who there needs to be enough influence over electeds who tend to vote with influence to approve housing in appropriate zoned areas. But like to Jed's point, there's commercial areas that are going to have to get rezoned and are having overlays with the housing element, and that also has to get done, and then it has to keep moving in for residential because of the issue. But I think that it depends on the state, but the state is oftentimes state representatives are made from people who started local, and they're like, oh, we're not going to be able, they're not going to be able to do it. So we're going to have to keep on writing more and more stringent laws. And one of the things about Larkin Place is what we said to the state of California is make those laws stronger, which I hate.
So if we have supportive community members, probably many people on this call, that want our elected officials to step up to the plate and join these regional efforts or find a local solution, what have you seen in what works for navigating that conversation? Because for every person that wants to find a solution, there's going to be 18 more, it seems, who don't, or at least don't want to lose the small town, don't want more people. More people means more traffic means more this. There's so many layers, there's so many complaints that are going to come.
It's interesting. Jed and I were talking about this today a little bit, and I think that one of the things is that the community engagement needs to start from a really intelligent, strategic place. And I think the first place to start is to think of all the stakeholders. not just the stakeholders who think like you, but the stakeholders who think differently than you, and then to start thinking of like who can be a champion in each area, to start speaking the language of, you know, whether it's like the economics, like the way Jed was talking about it, the kind of more feely place that I'm talking about, wherever, I think that we need to do a better job at identifying stakeholders, identifying champions before things get out of control and it just becomes a contest of rhetoric and echo chambers, because that's not going to work. And then it just depends on who is in. I mean, I hope that I don't want to come across as sounding jaded, because I'm not. And I get a lot out of this work and I love this work, but there's a lot of strategy in knowing how the people who we have elected into seats, how they operate. Too much? Is that too honest?
No, there's no. Anything to add to that, Jed? And then
I just want to add something that I think is really important is that, and I don't say this to qualify levels of involvement or levels of being connected or participation, but if all you do is constantly listen to the people who are like extremely plugged in and extremely connected, you're hearing kind of one side of something. And there's no greater example of that than in housing policy. So, and I'll give you a perfect example of this, which is simply that if you go to any councils of government, you go to any local cog, it doesn't matter which one, and I'm not trying to call any one particular group out. It doesn't matter which council of government. If you go to any like group of local electeds, there's usually like a lot of just real anger about state housing laws. Okay, like that's just kind of par for the course. But if you poll people in LA County, the LA Times has found that almost every major proposal that was either put forward or even failed on housing, most of them like have majority approval. And that's because people who read and understand the issues realize that the status quo is not working. And so they want to see something done. And so there is a disconnect between people who are connected, plugged in, political players, stakeholders, and then there's a larger mass of people who want to see progress on this. And I think the biggest challenge is making sure that the larger mass that wants to see housing and wants to see the housing crisis addressed, make sure that they're on record, that they have voice, that you record them, that you get them to speak up, that you get them, you know, to participate in city council meetings. It's probably people that don't usually speak up. It's probably people that aren't politically connected, that aren't a part of campaigns, aren't a part of political action groups. And we got to find a way to get them lifted up in the dialogue, because when you get everybody involved in it, you start to realize, oh, this has support. But if you only listen to like very connected circles, you think that this thing's dead on arrival. And that goes for kind of any housing and frankly, for any housing policy or law.
We need to do a better job at engaging hard to reach people who bureaucracy intentionally has kept a lot of people out. And we need to start, and that's the best part about Zoom, is that it has made it a little bit easier to participate, but we need to do better and we need to reach out intentionally to harder to reach communities and let them know you can send an email, you can write a letter, you can call me, I will listen. The people who you vote for, that is their job, is to listen to you and bring their concerns forward and broadcast it louder, because these meetings that start at 6:30, it's intentionally not to include everybody.
Yeah, but I mean, I can listen to city council meetings in my earbud while screaming at my children to go to bed. So it is helpful for accessibility for me, for sure. But like you said, it's identifying who's going to champion this issue. Perhaps that nonprofit grassroots group, just community members, would be the ones who would want to go door to door, pass out flyers, do something to mobilize support. Speaking of
mobilizing support. Matt brought up the question about perhaps how Claremont has used the Regional Housing Trust to deliver solutions. And if you could share, considering many of us on the House are from Laverne and San Dimas and want to know what we can do as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to share with that. The Regional Housing Trust, we offer assistance and help. The belief is that what we do is we finance, and we do that, but we really offer 3 levels of kind of championing housing. The first thing is a lot of city staffs, they don't have the kind of creative outside the box, planning capacities to take a piece of land that's either underutilized or just blighted. And how do you come up with a creative housing solution for it? They have planners who basically respond to applications, right? They review checklists to see if you meet the requirements of something, and they either issue something or they don't issue something. And the Housing Trust, we came up with a system where if you just have a piece of land and you have an idea, we'll develop the idea for you. We'll incubate the entire system for you to kind of help you get from, we got this empty parcel, we have no idea what to do with it, and we can take that and turn it into an idea. We also have a revolving loan fund. So there can be a parcel that's owned by somebody and maybe they want to get rid of it. And it's going to take you 2 to 3 years to come up with a plan and a viable, affordable housing solution. But in 2 to 3 years, that piece of land is going to go up in price 25%. So we have a loan fund that is very low interest. I think it's 0 interest, frankly. Don't quote me on that, but I can get that information for you. If you are committed to developing a piece of land and you want to get moving on it, but you don't have, the plan totally in order yet, we can loan the money to kind of lock in that price and then just hold it over for a few years till you get your plan ready. And then finally, the bread and butter of what we do, we finance housing. And to us, the big evaluation is, are you servicing the greatest amount of need, and when are you shovel ready? And Claremont successfully won funding for both the 956 Baseline Road project, which is breaking ground this year, 15 units, extremely low income, in partnership with Tri-City Mental Health. And then also we awarded, I believe, $1.5 million to the Larkin Place project. And so Claremont has been able to leverage its most readily available opportunities to turn them into capital funded projects, one much faster than the other, but not just like give money. We don't just write checks. We also develop ideas, and we also loan money to keep land prices locked while you develop that idea.
And that's something that San Dimas and Laverne have access to as well.
Absolutely. If you're a member of the Regional Housing Trust, yes. And Housing Trust membership is typically, so I'll give you a perfect example. Every city gets an allocation from SB2. SB2 created a permanent affordable housing planning funding source. And I believe that bill was passed in 2017, sponsored by Tony Atkins. And basically what it said was that every city gets a per capita equation of money to help develop and plan for affordable housing. It's not enough to build housing, but it is enough to do some planning work. And you can use a portion of those funds to pay for like your membership in the trust and paying the fees into the trust. As chair of the trust, I don't expect every city in the region to be in the same place. Pomona joined and they had like 3 projects ready to go. Some folks join and they're not ready to build projects yet. They're not there, but they're putting money in. And the belief is that we're getting some pieces of money. Claremont received, I think, $240,000 from SB2 last year. We're not doing anything with $240,000. Like, congratulations, here's your 4 parking spots, right? Nothing's going to happen with that money. But if 21 cities put in $240,000, we can finance projects this year. And so I hope that no matter where your city is, that you can get involved
with
that way.
that goes though, right? I mean, if we get cities to put in on a regional effort, then the dialogue becomes, where does that actually go?
Right.
Finding that. Okay, great. Former Mayor Rosenthal, you had your hand up or wanted to discuss some additional factors in the Claremont dilemma.
Actually, having been off of the council for a number of years, but I am still very interested in public policy, especially regarding housing. And the two things that I thought that were remarkable, unfortunately, about the recent proposal, well, I thought the proposal was great, perfect for the location, the need, and the process that it was, but the opponents never really identified themselves, but just simply spread negative wording, negative thoughts, used almost violent images to press their cause. And it was a committee. It never said so-and-so chairman and the followers are so-and-so. So who are these people who somehow persuaded the neighbors of the project to post signs and then, do further marketing? The other thing that I found that was interesting, and it's also related to a regular housing development up in a portion of land owned by the school district, is change. Oh my God, you would think that change was the worst thing in the world to happen. I've lived in Claremont for 50 years, and there has been more change in Claremont than anybody can recognize. Jennifer, who's shaking her head, yes, was born in Claremont. And, the businesses, the roads, the neighborhoods, the everything has changed. And it has been managed growth. It has been managed change. People don't understand that city councils are in charge of managing the change that is inevitable. So it is inevitable. And I thought those were the two factors that really were felt strongly in this recent kerfluffle. And we've just got to get over that.
Yeah, I think that it's one of the things I think that what the fear tactics do, like stop, like the mentally ill and drug addicted don't belong in this park. It hits us at literally our fight and flight place. That's our lizard brain responding. And so somehow there has to be a way to that kind of talk, to use a term that I've learned from Jed, flies in the face of our community's intelligence. We live in towns of good-hearted and intelligent friends. And this, like, that people are so easily captured with inflammatory rhetoric that's intended to scare you. I think that is at the heart of a public engagement campaign that I would really like to undertake through Tri-City regionally. That this is like, if it sounds crazy, it maybe is. And if your immediate response to learning something is fear, it's maybe intentional. Like maybe intentionally someone is scaring you. And so I think that we have an opportunity to actually grow together as humans and as friends and as a community. And I hope that that's the direction we'll be able to move in. But I agree with what you're saying, Karen.
Yeah, absolutely.
People say to protect a vacant lot.
It's that rhetoric that matters so much. And we've got a couple of questions. I see Ed Hume. Do you have got a question? And then either Phil or Isabel.
Yeah, all I was going to say was, I feel like, to Jennifer's point about the rhetoric, I think NIMBYism, I think we have to recognize that NIMBYism, if that's a euphemism for what you're talking about, is really just table stakes when it comes to land development at this point, just because there's a built-in bias against change, especially by folks that have been around for a long time, maybe. And so, I think that's just sort of, that's where you got to start. It's just the way it is. And you have to start with a plan to attack that head on, because although I love the idea that you're starting from a position of saying that, you know, that this is a region with good-hearted people who want the best for everybody. It's just not where people are, I don't think, generally. So I think you just have to start with a plan for that from the get-go. And then the other thing would be a question about, and maybe I can reach out to Mayor Jed separately or others about what the process is, because I'm really new to this. And if there was land available, maybe not for sale, but for land lease for housing, how would that work? And is that within the scope of the regional trust?
It absolutely is within the scope of the regional trust, but we want to do it with partner agencies. We don't want to do it for agencies. So yeah, absolutely. Any city that is interested in pursuing an opportunity, you know, our lines are always open. And I know we got a couple of questions. I'll be really quick about this. Ed, you were piggybacking off of exactly what Jennifer said about comments that are meant to fear. I just want to say that I'm so glad that this is happening here in this space, because one of the things that I'm really passionate about is the Democratic Party's position on this topic. We're the party of inclusion and progress. We can't be split on this. You know, I understand we're a big tent party, and I understand we're a big, diverse group of people. But if we are to be true to our values, providing housing is no different than providing healthcare, providing education, providing infrastructure and economic opportunity. So we have to be the leaders in this. The Democratic Party and the local clubs and the regional and the county and the state, we need to be the drivers of a stand that is pro-housing. And we're not there yet, but I hope we will be.
Agreed. Isabel and then David.
Yeah, thanks. And it turns out Phil has a question too. So first, my comment, well, you know, we're talking about how do we make these sorts of proposals more successful in the future. I think Councilmember Stark said getting community engagement from the very get-go, like even before it's a fully formed idea. Another idea that came to my mind after Councilmember Stark just spoke was, for those of you who live in Claremont, recently in Laverne, the County of Los Angeles had a proposal to have like a juvenile kind of detention center in the hills of Laverne. And I don't know, for those of you who followed it, there was some really inflammatory rhetoric around that, like these druggies, criminals, why do we want them in our city? And then I actually didn't watch it very closely, but Brittany told me that at a follow-up meeting, they started the meeting with some of the rehabilitated incarcerated youth to speak and share their stories about how being in a facility like this had changed their life, you know, and how, you know, where they were now, what path they were on now. And the tone and the rhetoric like really changed. And I think to Ms. Stark's point that like this is a human issue, and if we like can bring it back to like the humans who are like being affected by this, if we remember this isn't like a druggie or homeless people, like this is like a friend, a neighbor who needs like an extra hand, and we hear from those people and their stories. I think that could also be part of a strategy to change the way we talk about it, because it's easy to talk about the homeless when you're not sitting in a room of people who are unhoused, and you know, you can talk poorly about people, but when they're sitting right there and you're hearing the stories and how, you know, a rehabilitative housing program can, you know, help people, I think it could make a difference and maybe even, you know, de-escalate the intensity of that really ugly language.
Absolutely. Isabel, that makes me think of that. There's a Facebook group that was birthed out of many posts on the San Dimas Buzz by a mom whose son is unhoused in San Dimas. And she frequently asked neighbors, have you seen David today? Is David okay? And a friend of ours created a Facebook group called San Dimas is David, or David and San Dimas, for people to update his mother where he is, when they saw him, how he looked, did he have shoes, did he not? And there has been some like tear-jerking humanity happening on that page, because people heard his mom and he's one of their own, and all of these reasons that humanized him. 2 points. One, they're all human, even if they don't get paraded as being someone's mom. But also, even on their page, there has been some horrible rhetoric spewed. And so having the conversation and making sure that we're all being intentional champions of the use of our language, and how we engage in that conversation is so important. David. Oh, Phil, I'm sorry.
Oh no, David can go. Go to David and then bounce back to me.
Phil, go right ahead. Phil.
Oh, okay. I have two questions for Jed and Jennifer, because I think you're more versed in this. I'm looking for advice or rebuttals to like common arguments. One in the comments was about like a lot of people like, and water is a huge issue in California, but like, what's the argument against like when people say, oh, well, we can't build more housing because we don't have enough water. And then the other one is there's like, kind of to Jed's point about like how as the Democratic Party, we have to all come together on this issue, because there's a lot of groups in LA that like when there are proposals for projects, if there's not like the required percentage of low income or affordable housing, then these groups are against it. Where you kind of touched about it earlier, how like we just need more housing overall, even if it's high income or higher priced condos or whatever. But like, what's the argument that I can make for like that kind of housing and getting people on board with, even if it is more expensive housing? How can that help?
Jennifer, you want to do the water thing first? Because it's
Sure,
glorious.
Yeah, I think with the water situation is that we can't create an environment where two crises are pitted against each other and we act like one doesn't exist in the presence of the other. Additionally, the way that we built California is why we have a water crisis. Housing now is incredibly more sustainable. Building more densely is the way to use our resources more wisely. And so this notion that we can't provide shelter because we don't have enough water. Our water issue is water management. It truly is. It is, and that we are not going to solve issues around drought by continuing to uphold single family homes that are built on ginormous lots with all of this property to water. We're going to manage the drought by using our precious resource of water more efficiently, but housing is also a precious resource. That we have a water professional here, if you want to add anything, Jeff, to that.
I would
Sure.
love to.
I mean, I think that's very well said. Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff Hanlon. Yeah, I'm running for the Three Valleys board seat against Brian Bocock. But I wanted to, yeah, I agree with Jennifer. And you know, a good thing to remember is that California is actually a very water-rich state. We have a lot of water, but to your point, we use it in ways that are very wasteful. And when we say we can't grow our population or use it for municipal reasons because we don't have enough, it's a little bit disingenuous when we use well over 80% for agriculture, which is a huge part of our state, of course, but an enormous part of that is used irresponsibly for agriculture, growing stuff that is incredibly water intensive. And so we know the answers for using it more efficiently. And using it for people is the most economically efficient use of it. So, yeah.
I just saw the time. I enjoy y'all's presence in this conversation way too much. I do think we have Claremont concert in the park that they've got to bounce.
No,
for.
I don't have to bounce. It was at 6 and I finished it already. So sorry. I totally messed up the schedule. My fault. I don't have to run.
Okay, great. So we can snag a few of your minutes for the last couple of questions.
Yeah, absolutely. But I want to answer, Philip asked a second question about, the difficulty of getting support for housing when people say, well, it doesn't have any affordability in it.
Yeah.
And I can only just say one thing. That's a really complicated question, but I really encourage everybody to read this book. It's called The Affordable City. It's written by Shane Phillips, and he works for the Lewis Center at UCLA. And he tackles this very question. And basically, to make housing affordable, you need three things. You need a lot of supply, so you need a lot more housing. You need subsidy, so you need money to help people who can't afford basic rents. And you need stability. You need policies to make sure that people who are housed now stay housed. Okay. And the thing is that there is a sweet spot somewhere that you want housing to the extent that it can to be inclusive. You want housing to, if it's possible, to provide opportunity for different income levels. But you don't want that demand to stop housing.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a sweet spot somewhere, and no one knows exactly what or where or exactly what that threshold is. In wealthy communities that are typically pierced with histories of exclusion and exclusive zoning, there are what we call inclusionary housing laws, in which people, when they apply for permits to build a certain number of housing units, they're required to include housing units that are for different income levels. That's not a tool to increase housing production, but it is a tool to integrate your community. And, if next year your town was going to produce 250 more housing units, it's not going to produce an extra 125. But what it can produce is some numbers of different income levels. So it's not a volume strategy, but it is an integration strategy.
Mm-hmm. And would Claremont, Laverne, and San Dimas all be considered one of those previously exclusionary community?
I regret I don't want to speak for other communities that I'm not that versed in. Claremont adopted inclusionary housing ordinance over a decade ago. And with a lot of pride, I'm proud to say that our council moved forward an amendment. Our first ordinance called for 15% moderate income units or 10% low income units. And every single project that came forward chose the moderate. So we didn't build any low income units using the ordinance. And last year we amended the ordinance to require that at least 5% of the units always be low income. And so it took a lot of technical drafting, and I'm proud that we did it.
And it also has a component for rentals as well, for rentals to stay affordable in perpetuity, which is a big step.
And I don't know if anyone knows on the San Dimas end, I do believe that we have something like that in Laverne. Matt, are you confident? I remember the last development that they talked about at the Planning Commission, there was the requirement of having a certain percentage of the housing, because I found it interesting that those two developments were split up in different regions. Like the same developer was developing the more affordable housing south of Arrow, and then the also affordable to Laverne's standards development around Wheeler, I think. Do you recall?
It's my understanding that their practice is project specific, not a city standard like Claremont has.
I like that. And I guess that kind of circles back, Isabel, you talked about what can we do? It seems like that might be something that we can do, asking our elected officials to support an ordinance like that. David Estrada, can we get
You know
to your?
what, Brittany, we have Councilmember Ebner on the Zoom, so he may have some insight from San Dimas.
Yeah, very briefly, we don't have an inclusionary zoning right now. And that's something I proposed for the last few years. Right now, we're in the middle of revising some of our zoning requirements. And so, yeah, that's something that I definitely support. And I think it might gain some traction because, every time a new project is built, it's excluding those who can't afford to live in it. They're all market rate housing. And so anyway, we need these exclusionary zoning. I feel it's not just a matter of density, unless we were going to go way dense, which I don't think any of our projects are going to be. But inclusionary zoning is definitely a tool, in my opinion. The other thing is that small is not bad. So whether it's small units that are part of a multifamily, or even smaller units on lots, we don't always have to, build 1,600 or 2,000 or 2,500 square foot houses everywhere. And if somebody is going to be removing or replacing affordable housing, I feel it's on them to provide affordable housing in return in that same place, basically, unless they own two pieces of property on the other piece of property. But yeah, we definitely want to move in that direction. We don't want just more housing. We want the kind of housing that keeps our community diverse economically, in my opinion.
Yeah. And then that brings back us having that discussion as to why that's important, because I don't know if everyone agrees that that's necessarily a truth, that you want a diversified economic community. David, anything on that?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Mayor, thank you so much for being with us. Councilmember Stark, thank you so much for talking to us. I've had the pleasure of working out of Claremont and the Tri-City area for many years. And I was very interested how the Larkin Place situation was going to work out. And I'm very disappointed that it looks like it's kind of stuck in the mud at this point. Those of us who live in communities surrounding Claremont, we're looking at this, concerned about the vitriol that we were hearing from members of the community. And it's just terrifying to think that that may have been one of the main reasons that this project may be going off the rails. I've seen for many years now the success of Tri-City in building affordable housing throughout the Tri-City area. I know initially they faced the same sort of issues initially. However, I get the impression that they have found a formula or a roadmap on how to do it right, and do it with the input and buy-in from the surrounding community. So I have to tell you, I'm terribly disappointed to hear about the status of Larkin Place and why we got here. I mean, it was so far down the road. You had the funding, you had the place. It's a perfect location. The zoning was perfect. And now, is it going to happen? I don't know. But anyway, I enjoy hearing the lessons that you've learned and the advice that you're giving us on how we should do it in the future. And I'd like to have more of these sorts of conversations with you. Thank you all.
David, thank you so much. I also think it's really important that that exposing and stigmatizing people who are vulnerable, and additionally people's protected characteristics, is against the law. It's called discrimination, and it is not okay. And to then use the safety of your children as a way to like bolster that stigmatizing is just truly unacceptable. And so just in terms I feel like I have to apologize for some of the signs that are sprinkled around Claremont. They come from, these are not bad-hearted people, but it's people who are not who have blinders on and are not thinking about what these stigmatizing statements mean to people who live daily with mental health issues. So I just wanted to say that, and thank you, David, for the work you do.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you.
And also, John, I knew I recognized you. It's so nice to see you. I'm sorry that that when Mayor Leano was going around giving everyone their accolades, he left you out. And also, please call me Jennifer.
I joined late, so apologize for that.
Yeah, Jennifer and Jed, I am so thankful for you coming on and sharing your expertise and opinions. And we had so many folks in the crowd: Councilmember John, candidate Jeff Hanlon. Can you correct me? Hanlon. Great. I'm just so thankful for so many folks coming on and sharing their wisdom. And I agree with David's point. These conversations have to continue. So if Jed and Jennifer have any final words that they'd like to share, or if you have any insight in where interested members of the community should come for those conversations, whether it's the San Gabriel Valley Consortium or Regional Trust, or like what do we need to sink our hands into in order to continue this work?
I think that that we need to keep creating more and more super solid relationships with community groups that represent people who are struggling, so that this conversation isn't dominated by people who, that this like don't build here, who are people like the thing in Claremont and Laverne too, is if you've lived here long enough, like when I was a little girl, the house I live in wasn't built, yet my neighbors are fighting against housing being built. So it's like this. Anyways, I think that we need to really involve all of our community groups as best we can, and then when we involve groups that to help with engagement, I think it's also really important that those groups are listened to and brought in, so that it's never like a sort of transaction thing, like, oh, let me get this info from you, and then we won't listen. So I think that's also really, it's important to be sensitive. It's important to get stakeholders. It's important to keep stakeholders, and it's important to respect stakeholders.
I want to just close by thanking the Bonita Democratic Council for the opportunity to talk about housing, talk about Larkin. This work is extremely difficult, and it is the work that is constantly uphill. You can't go down this path of trying to take on these policy issues without accepting fully that it is a constant uphill climb with a lot of no's. You just have to know that. And that's okay, because when there's victory is extremely rewarding and satisfying. And so the one thing that I would just say to everybody on this call is that there is a solution in your community that you can zero in on right now. You don't need to wait to find out that there's some proposal. You don't need to wait to find out that there's this idea to amend your municipal code or your housing element update. There's something going on in your town right now. And it doesn't have to be construction. We could be facing a remarkable eviction cliff with the expiration of COVID protections, with the onset of new laws, specifically AB 1482, which was passed in 2019, became effective January 1, 2020. Work on housing is not only about housing construction. I mean, we have an entire generation of Californians who are vulnerable to housing instability because they're extremely rent burdened, meaning they're spending more than 1/3 of their monthly income on their housing costs right now. And with the skyrocketing costs of housing and increasing amount of investor landlords, people are raising rents at maximum capacities, and that's their legal right to do so. So the fight to ensure stable housing, the fight to ensure that all people have a home, it isn't only a construction fight. And whatever it is in your community that you identify as a way to help fight for this, I'm only a phone call away. and look forward to collaborating with all of you in the future. Thank you again.
Britt, you're on mute.
So for letting me know that I was talking to the air. Thank you so much, Jed and Jennifer. I would ask before you leave, if you could put any contact information that you would prefer folks to reach out to, specifically if it's anything other than the city email, please drop that in the chat because I know folks have more questions and interest in continuing this work. I am so thankful for this conversation. And we're going to move on to our membership meeting. So Matt will take that lead. All are welcome to stay on, but your night is yours to enjoy as well. Thank you again for joining this great conversation.